in this video, I'm gonna be talking about the 10 pillars of Buddhism by Sangharákshita, which is this. To be completely honest, I didn't like it. I didn't like the author at all whatsoever, and I didn't know who he was when I picked the book. But of course, the title caught my attention, and I just started reading it. And it's actually, I'm sad because I do like Buddhism. I'm an atheist, but like some Buddhist teachings. And I don't want to offend the community of Buddhism, but at the end of the day, I will criticize. So, it's just really sad because I don't think this is like a good book. If you don't know anything about Buddhism, I wouldn't recommend this one. I have read other books. I'm no expert, but the other ones are much better. They don't try to tell you how to think, as in to directly tell you about political views or stuff like that, which this guy does. One of the reasons it annoyed me, one of the many reasons, and also because I have gone to a couple of different guided meditations, and like no one tries to push you on political things, I just, that's why it annoyed me so much. And to be fair, I have gone more towards like the guided meditations, more that are like, I guess, inclusive for atheists than anything else. But so I don't know, maybe if you go down the rabbit hole, it does become a cult or something. I want to believe no, but of course, I don't know, people of all communities like extremes sometimes. But even when it wasn't the best book, and I'm just really upset that I'm starting like with the YouTube channel with this book. But anyway, even when I don't agree with some things, and I will be mentioning them, probably there will be a couple of rants. I did like some other parts of the book, so it wasn't like complete garbage. But again, it's like, why did I start with this book? It's what annoys me. He was giving a speech because he created this order, Western Buddhist order in the UK, and in the 16th anniversary, he gave a speech, which is this one. So that's why, I guess, that's also why it can be a little bit weird at times. Okay, so I will start with who Sangharákshita is. To be completely fair with the book, it was obviously completely wrapped with plastic, so I couldn't actually open it. But here, it does say that he also converted certain people in India. Which is one of the many reasons I don't like him. I will be hating on him so much, but I just really don't like him. Anyway, let's start with him. Let's start with Sangharákshita. So he was born as Dennis Lingwood in London, 1925. And at the age of 16, he read a couple of Buddhist texts, and then he realized that he was a Buddhist and that he has always been a Buddhist. Then the Second World War happened, and he was sent to India as a soldier, and he stayed there for 20 years. He actually, he went to a couple of places there, like Delhi, Calcutta, and then later on he went to Singapore and other places around there. But in India, he became closer to Buddhism. So his spiritual journey began in a more, I guess, serious way. Then, when the war ended, or maybe I don't know exactly in which year, but he had a choice to go back or to stay in India. And he chose to stay in India. He also, I mean, apparently he deserted the army, which, I mean, this is well, whatever. He deserted the army and he stayed in India, and he also burned his passport and papers, and which, if anything, this starts to tell us that he was a little bit extreme and a little bit too much, because, I mean, to burn your passport, it's like only extreme people do that. Later on, along with B.R. Ambedkar, they had an important role in the rebirth of Buddhism in India. The leader was actually Ambedkar, but this Sangharákshita had a big role converting others. I am personally very against about any religion trying to convert people, especially if it's like cases like this Sangharákshita, where they targeted people that, I mean, they were vulnerable people, because apparently in Hinduism in India, I don't know nowadays, but at least back then, the whole caste system was very in place, like they could segregate. So the people at the bottom of the castes were named as or labeled as the untouchable, which obviously, I mean, is wrong. But because of this, is that it makes them vulnerable people for being completely segregated by their original religion. And so then these other people come along and basically convert them, and that's how Buddhism grew so much in India. I mean, in a certain part, I guess. I mean, I don't know exactly where, but the point is that this author had a huge role in it. And I mean, again, I'm not for conversion. Even when I like Buddhism, I wouldn't go around trying to convert others into Buddhism. So, well, this, and because of this, is that he is a big figure of the modern Buddhism. I mean, I imagine he is, but I haven't heard of him until now. Not that I mean, again, it's not that I am super into Buddhism, but I am just like, really? We don't have better people to be their big roles for the modern Buddhism. Which, by the way, there are others that I could argue they are also part of the modern Buddhism that are really, I mean, for the little I read about them, I mean, which actually one of the books is here. I don't remember her name, but she's a monk and she's pretty good. And she doesn't give political takes in her book. I mean, at least the one I have read. Probably, maybe I should read more. And who knows? The more I read, maybe the more I don't like them. Which I don't think so. I really like Buddhism. However, I also disagree with many things, which we will. I guess I will give my opinion when we reach those points. So let's start with general terms and general information about the precepts of Buddhism and about Buddhism in general. So there are 10 silas in the canonic sources, and there are 3 refugees, or also known as the triple gems, which is the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. Dharma is a teaching path to illumination, and Sangha is a spiritual community. In order to achieve the illumination, one has to act with that determination and organize their life in accordance, which means to place Buddha at the center of your personal mandala. And once he's there, then you reorganized your life around it, and you can add or remove interests accordingly. Going to the refuge is the one area all Buddhists have in common. Now, what we're going to be seeing with the 10 precepts is that there are two types of behaviors of the body, mind, and the speech. One must be followed, and the other one shouldn't. Which is how all this, whenever I bring these precepts, it's gonna be like abstain from this, and not only abstain, but also do this. So because this, I guess, the mind, or just there are two different mental states. One is the akusala, which is the clumsy mental state, the one we try to avoid, and the kusala, which is a skillful mental state. The clumsy mental states reduce the skillful mental state, and that's why one must follow the skillful ones. And it's because, I don't know around the world, but at least in India, back then, there were sacrifices of animals, and which now it doesn't happen, as far as I know. But even there is a short story called Kinari Yataka, which has at least a brief moment about a huge sacrifice and how Buddha decided to stop that sacrifice. So there is a part in this story. I haven't read it completely. I just briefly read what he made reference to, and it's that the king Sukandrima was organizing a big sacrifice. So he wanted an animal of every kind. It doesn't matter if they didn't have legs or not, even if there were only two legs or like that. So in other words, he just wanted one of every species. And so the protagonist of this story is the prince Sudanu, which is Buddha in one of his many lives. And when he approached the king and asked him, why are all these animals gathered together here, he said, well, it's because I will be sacrificing them. And Sudanu was like, what for? And then the king replied that it was because, well, first that everyone was gonna have food, solid and broad, but more importantly, it's because for every life that could be sacrificed, those lives could go to heaven, and he, the king, would revert in heaven the number of animals he would sacrifice. So this Sudanu then said, but why? Taking a life is against the Dharma, because abstaining from taking a life, it's part of the Dharma. And then he proceeded to list all these 10 precepts or right actions, which were the real Dharma. When he finished explaining this to the king, he convinced him, and he stopped the huge sacrifice. Now we're gonna see these precepts individually. The first one is abstain from taking a life, and the opposite of this is love. Because how this is perceived, these 10 precepts, it's as in you should abstain from doing this bad action, like taking a life. But it doesn't stop there. You also have to, as in, not because you're not taking a life, you are in the path or on the path of enlightenment. You also have to take the positive action, which in this case is love for this particular precept. And that's how you actually walk the path. And I guess I kind of like this approach because it's more as in, look, if you're a horrible person, let's start with simply abstaining. Just abstain from doing bad things, or don't worry right now from doing the good things. Just worry about not harming others. So that I like, it's like there is a bare minimum. You can focus on that. And then if you want to go a little above, then you have these positive actions to follow, so that you become enlightened or just want a prosperous life. So it's to kill a living creature is to inflict upon him the worst of evils, since life is the greatest of goods. And one shouldn't do anything upon another human being against their own will, meaning that one can't do it by force nor by violence. It also applies of when it comes down to emotional abuse or deceit. And it's because to kill someone is not only the extreme of what violence can look like, but it's also the complete negation of solidarity to another living creature. Without this rule, human society can't exist. No culture and no spiritual life. Therefore, to act from power means to interact with others in terms of violence, or in a way which one denies another being instead of affirming it. Dhammapada is a collection of Buddha's sayings in verse, and it's the most widely read. And in this Dhammapada there is one verse which says that if you look at yourself in other creatures, then who could you hurt? What harm could you do? One doesn't simply abstain from taking a life, but to act every day, a little bit more from love. This way, a change inside the individual can take place, as big as changing the center of gravity, as this Sangharákshita says it. And obviously in this I agree. In this I agree with him. We're with the 3 precepts of the body. Later on we're gonna go to speech and the mind. So maybe I'm getting ahead a little bit, but it's as in what I like of Buddhism is that you should also change your thoughts for yourself so that you can feel better with yourself, with your life, with your environment. And that way you will also, it will naturally start coming from you, these positive actions. And well, the reason I very much prefer this take of Buddhism compared to others is because it's not as in, if you think of something bad, then someone is gonna punish you because you shouldn't have thought of that. But it's more as in, you will feel better just by thinking in positive ways. And also, Buddhism doesn't say that it's easy. It's like, but it will help you. And by helping yourself, you will help others. So again, well, on that I agree. But again, it's because now we're talking about proper Buddhism. This observance of the first precept naturally translates in becoming a vegetarian. Which I could agree. Maybe because I'm vegetarian. I agree because we're talking about living creatures, living beings, not just human beings. As in, this solidarity extends to other species. I am not advocating for the entire world to become vegetarian or vegan, okay? Because I don't think it's possible anyway. So until here we're fine, but then he continues, because of course he has to continue. And it's also because at least vegetarian, as in vegetarianism, I do think it's an important part of Buddhism. And then he says that it also translates in naturally becoming to against abortion, as in you shouldn't. So it's basically to not abort or encourage others who do it. I disagree. So this is why I was so sad of talking about this book as my first Buddhist book for the channel, because I like Buddhists and they're gonna hate me after this. But I have to criticize what it must be criticized. Anyway, coming back to the abortion department. So my take on abortion is this. It's not, I guess, a mainstream take. So my take is this. I support abortion to be legal in the first 3 months. And I support it mostly for all the rape victims. Having said that, I don't agree when abortion is taken as another measure to prevent pregnancy, because clearly you already got pregnant. So I don't. Not only I don't like, I really disagree, and I do think it's unethical when certain women, and I do think it's the very, very tiny minority, but the problem is that they also tend to be loud, when they go around saying that they have gone through, I don't know, several abortions. I mean, that's being irresponsible. So I don't know how to explain it. It's just like, I do think it should be legal, the 3 months. However, I do understand that some, and this is another part I don't fully like, when it's just addressed towards women. I mean, yes, they are the ones pregnant, and yes, you know, how is it? Your body, not my body, my choice. But obviously, it's not that they got pregnant out of nowhere, you know. So there are responsibility on both sides. Only one actually pays it because of nature. But I guess, as in, my point is just like, it should be taken as something serious, and it should be for specific circumstances. I understand that because it's so difficult sometimes to prove rape. Actually, because sometimes it's difficult to prove it, it's because I think it should be like completely legal for everyone, even though some will misuse it. So anyway, that was my take on abortion. So I managed to make everyone angry. Then he also says that by following or by having the observance of this precept, it's like you should worry about the environment. You should oppose the production and use of nuclear weapons, and oppose the production of any other weaponry, and many more things. Oh, so I disagree. I mean, yes, in theory I agree with everything, but in practice it's not that simple. So I mean, I guess it's more as in, let's be smart and realistic about the problems that this world has. And okay, and before that, it's just like, again, from what I have experienced of Buddhism, I have never encountered anyone that says you should do this or you should believe this. Probably that's why I went close to Buddhism, because it was never political. And like it or not, this is political. Because, as in, why? I guess he's trying to give examples on how you can apply it, but I would still disagree. Because first you're telling people what they should do or how they should be thinking, especially when he's giving so specific ones, you know, like, and it's like, fine, all of these are debates. At the end of the day, I mean, even US, it's just like, yeah, of course, I would love this world to not have nuclear weapons, and I would love for all the weaponry to not exist and to never has existed. But obviously, it's not gonna happen. So it's just like, as in, because he is explicitly saying is to oppose this production, as in to actually take action against these things, or to care about environment. It's like, yes, you should care about environment, but I guess my problem is when he's saying like, basically become an activist, because Buddhism says it, and it's, I mean, no. No, as in, if you want to become an activist, think what you're fighting for, look at the information, actually understand, and then go and do. Don't just go and be like, oh, I don't want nuclear weapons, and it's like, okay, nuclear weapons is one thing, but let's, as in, I don't want weaponry. It's just like, I mean, do you really think you're gonna win that battle? So, and again, because it's someone that actually says it directly, just in his order on whatever, as in political actions that one should take. Because even I'm willing to give a pass to the vegetarian, not only because because I might be biased, but it's also because that is part of the lifestyle, because it's something you eat, I mean, again, I wouldn't agree on trying to persuade others to be a vegetarian, but until that, I would agree. But because the rest is not part of the lifestyle, you shouldn't be talking about this when you're talking about Buddhism. I think these are political statements. So every precept is going to have a pillar with a specific gem or precious material as a metaphor. And this first precept is the diamond pillar, because it's the hardest substance known. Therefore, the way of love is stronger than the way of power, and it's in conditions to overpower it in all of its forms. I mean, I find it a little bit corny, but I mean, I would agree. So the second precept is to abstain of taking what is not given to you freely. And by taking the positive action could be generosity. So love gives itself, meaning love is a donation from one person to another. Or if one prefers it, a rendition. In this case, rendition, it's a total abandonment of any advantage derived from the way of power. And I mean, this one I like. I mean, it's like, again, whatever. I mean, I do have a political opinions, but obviously when you're talking about religion or a philosophy, I don't know, you tell me if I'm wrong. I'm actually curious to know if I'm actually wrong or not. To give a belonging to another person, and because that in itself, it's an expression of love. So it's to abstain from taking not only belongings, but also time and energy from another person against their will. And this one is also parts that I liked of this precept, because even when I started reading it, and also because I was triggered by him, I was just like, okay, abstain from this. But it never occurred to me also the whole time and energy. To be fair, I do think it comes down also with politeness. But I don't know, I guess I just liked it that it was like, it was mentioned as in it's not just material possessions that one can take. Anyway, so we take time from people when we impose them to do something when they have work to do, or when we force them to listen a conversation they don't want to listen. And to take energy for another person, it's even worse, because we are forcing them to listen to complaints or pleas for so long that they are in a physical and emotional exhaustion, and sometimes even a nervous breakdown. So if you don't feel grateful, something isn't right, since your attitude is that of taking advantage and just taking without care of the other person. In other words, I guess it can be like you're feeling entitled to the other person's time and energy, and that's why you don't feel the slightest gratitude. Because what he says is that gratitude can only be felt by mature individuals. A real individual feels the gratitude, but also express it. In this precept, he decided to go and be a communist with his statements. So I will be ranting. So what he says is that property isn't distributed in an equitative way, and that for a Buddhist, there is a combination between the way of power and the way of love. Let's stop there, because it's just like, as in, I would agree that Buddhism strives for balance as a whole, but I have, again, it's the first time I hear this of the whole between power and love, because of what he's gonna say next. But well, and also before going next, is the whole this of properties and distributed equitative. Again, I do think this is a political issue, which no religion should tell you what you should think about political matters. So in Sangharákshita's words, it's in a democratic country, it can be achieved a more equal distribution of property and money through legislation, which in effect means to force an expropriation from the minority to a majority in the biggest scale possible from the principle of generosity or sharing. End of quote. The point is that you take from the rich ones, which are the minority, to give to the majority. This is what he's saying, like about property and the money. And he says it to force an expropriation. And it's just like, as in, first, this is blatant communism. And also that because he just covers himself with the whole, even if you're in a democratic country, and he does that in all the topics I've been ranting, he does that, he just hides kind of like, because Buddhism wants the best for everyone, then we should expropriate the property. Like, no, as in, Buddhism doesn't say that. I mean, as far as I know, and if it does, it's just gonna be like, what the fuck? Because again, as in, this is no balance of power and love. You shouldn't, I mean, this is the proper taking, taking a belonging from someone else by force to either to yourself or to a bunch of people. Like, you're going against the precept completely. And then and just to make it worse, he also says that this latter one, which is the quote I just read, is a responsibility for an organization like the Western Buddhist order, which is the order he himself founded. It's just like, why would that be your responsibility? And for me, he's taking this, or he's making this order to make it a cult in order to push communism. And that's why I dislike him so much. I mean, I dislike him for many reasons, but this one being the main one. And I mean, it's just like, why are we discussing politics when it should be Buddhism? You know why? Because he wrote it, he said it. Because I think the last video is when I talked about how people should be smarter when addressing problems. Which isn't to say like to not address a problem, it's just to address it in the most intelligent way so that one can actually help. And you know what? The 10th precept talks about this. He doesn't follow the precepts. It's what anyway, in other words, this democratic government should do something by force for the poor without giving a flying F about the consequences, even if that ends up in what we can see now in Venezuela, for example, or what happened in Vietnam, or if you have gone to Cuba, like there are very horrible scenarios that can happen if you do what he is suggesting in a Buddhist order. I mean, why is he talking about this? So anyway, this precept is the pillar of gold, because gold is the most precious of metals, and it's used for commercial exchange. And of course, he continues triggering me because he says that gold is unalterable by hot, humidity, and the majority of corrosive agents. Likewise, generosity isn't affected by the conditions in which it works. But guess what? Generosity is affected by the conditions in which it works. As in, if you take generosity as giving, as a donation, still it's under the condition of what is your current position. Are you in a position to actually help another person, or you're not in a position to help another person? And it's not just about money. It can be about giving food or even giving shelter, it's like, or it can extend to animals, like stray dogs, for example. Like, are you in a position to actually bring them, all of them, home and provide them for food, 24/7 care? As in, it's not that simple as just be generous because there are no conditions that could ever limit your generosity. As in, of course there are. This Sangharákshita is doing his best to push his own communist agenda, which is the main thing I very much dislike. What I said is, like, one must have the very least of common sense to think in questions about any specific matter, as in, how are you gonna do that, and how is that gonna affect? You cannot just simply do stuff because you want a certain outcome. You have to think, you have to be smart about it. To the third precept, which is another one he didn't follow. So the third one is to abstain from a harmful sexual conduct. And the positive action is contentment. The worldly existence is divided in 3 layers. These layers are planes, worlds, or spheres. And then you have the sexual desire, which is kama, the archetypal form, which is rupa, and the non-archetypal form, which is arupa. The plane of sexual desire consists of several worlds, and I will be mentioning them in ascendant order. So there is an infernal world, then the ravenous ghosts, then the world of the asuras or anti-gods, the animal world, the human world, and the world of the gods, the inferior ones. The gods that are inferior go from the 4 great kings, which are of the 4 spatial directions, to the gods that control the creations of others. Okay, and what is important here just to highlight is that, so in the plane of sexual desire, it's the human world. Then we have the archetypal plane, which has 16 subplanes, from the heaven of the gods that belong to the company of the Brahma, to the pure dwellings, who are inhabited by the great spiritual beings who have broken free the 5 chains that tie them to the sexual desire plane. And this means that they are not gonna reincarnate in those planes anymore. And the androgynous are the ones that inhabit this plane. The non-archetypal plane consists of 4 planes inhabited by the Brahmas, a class of spiritual beings superior to the gods. And as in, the reason why I mention all this is because for the spiritual life, it's important because it consists of the progression from the bottom worlds to the superior ones. And I mean, we're in the human one. So the spiritual life also consists of the progression from the sexual dimorphism, which is male-female, biological and psychological, to an androgynous spiritual state. This obviously doesn't mean in the physical world, it's more as in through meditation. I will be mentioning it, but it's, I guess, to reach that point of neutrality. So the sexual dimorphism is a state of polarization, tension, and projection, which leads to a state of dissatisfaction. Whereas in the state of spiritual androgynous, one feels at harmony, relaxed, and content, which comes more with the meditation, as I have been saying. It's not that you have to hate your body. You just have to, as in, instead of having these two, but because that's also like a thing that it's the feminine energy and the masculine energy. So I guess it comes to properly blend those together in a meditation. As in to reach that complete blend of it, which will lead to the harmony. And because it's during the meditation that one transcends the state of spiritual androgynous. The sense of Samantha Bhavana, or the development of calmness, one progresses through the dhyanas or superior states of consciousness. And then he says that meditation and celibacy go hand in hand, and they strengthen one another. I could agree, especially when we're talking about monks. He starts to annoy me because he clearly didn't follow it. But let's continue. And then it's like, for this reason, Sangharákshita says that they, and by they I mean the order, the Western Buddhist order, encourage environments of only one gender, because in this way, and by this I imagine, or what that he's talking about, is particularly about meditations, guided meditations that are only for men and only for women. Not only to limit the opportunities of sexual misconduct, but also to take a break from the sexual polarization and to offer an opportunity to transcend for a couple of moments and to simply be a human being, a real individual. I disagree. In this one, I guess it's different points of views. The ones I've gone, it's mixed. I don't see why there should be of only one gender, because for many reasons. First, it's just like, so what if you're gay? So you're not removing this opportunity of sexual misconduct, not that they, the only one that did it is Sangharákshita, but as in the people, for me that's not a good enough argument. And also because in order to be a human being, and I don't know what, no, as in for me this is just too extreme, because if you are in control of yourself, there shouldn't be a problem. Also, because when you meditate, you close your eyes. So I don't see why you should have these two. One thing is if it is a retreat, which I've never gone to one, and maybe I have to experience that one. But just for regular classes or regular guided meditations, I don't see the point. And again, even if it's not just about that, you should be able to, again, to control yourself and your mind. And even if, I guess it's like, don't make it even that easy on yourself, by removing half of the students. You could put it at practice at a real test if you are with the opposite gender, as a straight person, and just still be able to control yourself to behave properly. Because just removing the other half, it's just like, then you're not in control. Okay, so this author also mentions that meditation and one gender environments are absolutely indispensable for those who want to progress in the enlightened path. I mean, and this is another one I fully disagree. I mean, to say that it's absolutely indispensable. Well, I mean, depends if you believe in the nirvana or not, and if Buddha achieved it. I mean, I know that he went and lived alone in a tree, but you should be able to achieve it without going into the extreme. Again, I don't like extremes. Buddhists are really gonna hate me. Anyway, let's continue. He also mentions that there are masculine asuras, which are the anti-gods. So the masculines are ferocious, aggressive, and ugly, and the feminine ones are voluptuous, seducers, beautiful, and devour men. Apparently, no one knows what the female asuras do, what the male asuras do to the females. But according to him, one can imagine it. And because of that is that the Buddhist order Triratna, which is one of the three gems, doesn't wish to resemble either. So it's not about the negation. It's because for me, he's contradicting himself. But because it's not about the negation, but the transformation. And it's not about an evasion, but a progression. And this progression is about going from an absolute psychophysics sex identity to a relative one, to not identify oneself at all. And this is more as in the meditation, I'm not talking about. I mean, on this I would agree, like especially if you know how to meditate and I mean, I have tried, okay? I have never reached like this magical moment. And it's not that it's a magical moment, it's just like this, just to, I mean, I don't know if detach is the proper word, but to reach that peaceful harmony moment is what you want to reach. And because of these different, as I call it, energies, male and female, it's, as in, I understand this sentence, like through meditation is how to blend them, and then it becomes one. It's not that there are no genders. However, I disagree. As in, it's just like, for me, he's contradicting himself, because it's like, if it's not a negation or an evasion, then why you cannot meditate with your same gender? I don't see the problem. The third precept is to abstain from false speech, and the positive action is the veracity. So we just finished with the body precepts, and we're going into the speech. So for Buddhism, speech is just as important as the body and the mind, because it's the intermediate of these two. And because speech is between the action and the thought, and that's why it's so important to control the speech. Yet it's so difficult. The speech is the manifested action which occupies a place in the external world. Hence, it has consequences for oneself and for others. Like my opinion on this video. So Dhammapada mentioned it's very painful to speak with wrath, and as a result of it, one experiences its retribution. So controlling speech is so difficult because it's nothing but a verbalized thought. In the Buddhist tradition, they point out that it's through a systematic attention is that one can actually control the speech. And how they do it is by observing complete silence for periods of time. I don't know how long it can go, this silent period, but it's never perpetual, because apparently in Buddhism it's prohibited, or it's not, I don't know if it's prohibited, but it's not allowed, because it hinders the spread of Dharma. I just thought that I don't even like that phrase of the spread of Dharma, because it's again I don't know how I am processing it is as in the conversion of Buddhism. Especially because it's him who is saying this. The positive action is to speak truthfully, because it's truth is what makes communication, real communication, possible. And it's so important for communication as a whole. Because as he says it's like in whichever society where false speech predominates, there will be inevitably a hindrance in communication. Without truthfully speaking, there can't be a civilization, nor a culture, nor a spirituality. And without veracity, society itself can't exist. Yes, it can exist, but in a chaotic way. That's also why he then proceeds to mention that false testimony precludes the application of justice. Obviously, this being a specific of the court. So when this doesn't happen, like when there's a false testimony, there is injustice. And when there is injustice, it tends to be because the correct rule is replaced for the rule of power. But as we have seen, for him, the power applies when he wants it. So truthfully speaking is to mention the precise facts without leaving any relevant circumstance outside. So that's why when one is retelling a story that another person said, it's never, as in one can never take enough measurements or to do their best in order to replicate what it was said, and not only in words but also the spirit in which those words were said. So when one speaks the truth, one expects to be believed. Otherwise, there can't be communication. Similarly, when others speak the truth, one should believe them. So to not believe someone when telling the truth, one is denying another person their social identity, and human solidarity is broken. Because this belief is an act of violence, which I agree, especially when we're talking about slander cases. Which is why slander is a crime, no? One would think it's common sense, but nowadays. This pillar is the one of pearls. And the reason why it's of pearls is because pearls are at the bottom of the sea. So one must dive in order to reach it. Therefore, as in, one must dive in order to reach the truth. And this one, for example, I could even say with his communism ideas, is like, but we're not talking about politics. Now let's go with abstain from hostile speech. And the positive is kind speak. Abstain not only from speaking hardly and crudely, but also from falling in indecent language, like obscenities and vulgar words. Since this type of language, showcases emotional immaturity, poor imagination, and limited vocabulary. I guess when we're triggered, I think I'm being pretty decent with him. And speaking kindly purifies and invigorates. The pillar is of amber because it's an organic translucent substance which takes a fine polish. Abstain from useless speech. What you should do is speak with meaning. Speech can only have a real meaning when life itself has it, and life can only have real meaning when one has a purpose and a defined goal. Meaningful speech is a path to enlightenment, since it's a deep communication between two or more persons, and one should avoid frivolous talk. And this is basically to know when to address a subject, learning how a conversation is flowing and the atmosphere of the meeting, because he writes or mentions the example of Buddhism, that as much as he would like to talk about Buddhism, if you talk about Buddhism all the time, or with people that are not even interested in it, then you are falling into the frivolous talk. Which, at least in this, I liked it, because it's like, okay, I'm glad that you're at least applying this to not only yourself, but obviously to the philosophy. Well, because of this, is that this pillar is the one of silver. Because silver is susceptible to be tarnished and has to be polished by insight. To abstain from slander. Instead of it, do harmony speech. To ill speak is to show a hostile heart that has hate and an ill will. It's a clumsy mental state. To have malicious speech is to have the intention to provoke disunity, discord, and enmity. The person who abstains from this Dishonest behavior also has to establish harmony. So, for example, if there are two people that are in discord, then one must do its best to bring unity between these two parts. This pillar is the one of opal, because opal has these rainbow colors. This signifies the diverse types of people in a society. To abstain from greed, we have to aim for tranquility. And it's because greed is a state of constant frustration, because it's the fight of the ego with the no-ego. You want what you don't have. Because of this, that the end goal is to possess what you don't have. Feeling in this way the dwell of its own poverty and empty interior. And one of the methods in which one can get rid of this greed or greedy mentality is through meditation. This because there is not only one way to meditate. There are several different forms, working with a specific clumsy mental state at a time. And so this type of meditation, which I believe he is referring to the Hatha Yoga in this part, can erase greed because it stops the trend and allow oneself to see its uselessness. This pillar is the one of emerald because it's green, and it's because also leaves are green. The effect that nature has on the human mind, or on the mind in general, I would say, is a calm effect. We also have the abstain from the grudge and instead apply compassion. Also because there is a connection between hate and greed. Because greed is a state of the ego to possess the non-ego, and hate is a state that surfaces from that hindrance that occur of not being able to possess that no-ego. Therefore, greed is a psychological first formation, while hate is a consequence of it. And to break the precept of greed, it's a serious matter. However, it's not as serious as to break the precept of hate. I'm quoting now: a bodhisattva that breaks the precepts out of desire still has the living beings in its bosom, while the bodhisattva that breaks the precepts out of hate, they reject completely the living beings. And that's why hate and compassion exclude one another completely. The pillar of this precept is the pillar of ruby due to the blood color that the bodhisattva is willing to spill throughout the centuries in benefit for all living beings. How I'm taking this, because I believe he wasn't that explicit in the text, is that it's not to hurt others, clearly, because it could go against the first precept, but it's as in oneself, the bodhisattva, a spill of blood, but of oneself in the benefit of others. And by that I mean as in, I guess, to do the work. The reason I'm highlighting this is because I'm aware that there are some Buddhist extremists, aka terrorists, in some parts of the world. It's a minority, since obviously it goes against what Buddhism stands for. And we come to the last precept, which is abstain from false opinions. The positive side of this is wisdom. Firstly, a false opinion is a wrong way of looking at things. Secondly, this false opinion manifests itself systematically in intellectual terms as a doctrine form, like communism. See why I don't like him? And so this false opinion can be an expression or rationalization of a polluted mental state by greed and hate. And okay, so I did put a parenthesis that this can also be out of pure and simple ignorance, because sometimes people are just ignorant, which, I mean, as in, you're not trying to harm, you're just ignorant. You really don't. Either because you don't have the right information or different points of views on a matter, maybe that's why you your point of view became skewed. It doesn't necessarily have to be that you have a clumsy mental state. I mean, in the case of Sangharákshita, he did have a mental state, like a clumsy mental state. For me, it's also like a little bit funny that he mentions this, because if anything, I could say communism is precisely that. Like, you have this, I mean, as in from the leaders of communism, this polluted mental state that it's creating. But well, Sangharakshita had his own opinions. And then he proceeds to say that the correct opinion isn't contaminated by greed, hate, or an illusion, but it sees things for what they are. Spoke the communist. If anything, that's why one has to be open to information. I mean, because if you want to see things for what they are, you should see what communism has done to countries. So this teacher, Sangharakshita, had a false opinion. And anyway, what he mentions is that the correct opinion is also a no opinion, in the sense that it doesn't hold itself with the same persistence nor the same conviction in its absolute veracity. Which on this I would agree. Like, not necessarily, as in I don't agree necessarily on the no opinion, but I agree that you are not maybe as stubborn to receive these counter arguments, because, and it comes through wisdom, honestly, like, as in, and also from humility, I guess, that you might be wrong, that, and I think here is where you, I mean, it's just like this precept, I liked it, but at the same time I find it tricky, because obviously it's not that you want to have a false opinion, or at least I want to believe most, it's not that they want to have a false opinion, it's just like, you can be wrong. And that, I mean, that just happens to all of us. So I guess it's more as in, be aware that because you can be wrong, you should be able to listen to another person's point of view. And from there we see how it goes, with arguments, debates, and all that. Buddha said that the Tathagata doesn't have points of views. The Tathagata is the one that has achieved the highest spiritual or religious goal. Buddha was a Tathagata. Well, and he said that he has no points of views, meaning that even though they look at things for what they are, they have a critical consciousness that can't give a complete and definite opinion in conceptual terms. How I am reading this, it's more as in it's not necessarily that you don't have a point of view, but you are humble enough to understand that there can be new information. Buddha said that the teachers of Dharma are like a draft, because it's like a something that is left behind once one reaches the other shore. I mean, I did like this allegory, because it's more as in, you keep moving forward, you keep learning, but not necessarily that because you left it behind, it means that you don't acknowledge that it was useful for you, of course. However, what I find also funny is that Sangharakshita, it's going against what Buddha said, which is like, I mean, Buddha didn't have opinions, so why are you spreading communism in your order? Then you're having a point of view. You're not having just a point of view, but you're encouraging others to have your same point of view, and then all together do something, who knows, to change things. False opinions are the precipitations and crystallizations of clumsy mental states. The easiest way to abandon them is by eradicating the source of this clumsy mental state. Because illusion is the source of false opinions, but also the source of greed and hate. And again, I don't fully agree on this, because I don't think, I mean, not always. It can apply to some individuals in maybe specific aspects, but not all the time. I think people can be wrong. We are all wrong. No one is expected to know everything. So one of the ways actually in which we can step out of a false opinion is through sincere discussion. So the sincere discussion with other members of the spiritual community, which emotional positivity and intellectual clarity are superior to oneself. Okay, a point here. I don't like that he's the one saying it because he doesn't have the best of the records, but I kind of agree with this statement. Obviously, I don't think only with the spiritual community. It would depend which topic we're talking about, which false opinion it's there. But I agree that it's with emotional positivity and intellectual clarity one can step out from a false opinion. And it is also good to go with authority figures in the topic, just because obviously they know more than you. However, I don't think, as in, you should be humble enough to understand that someone else at a particular subject know more than you. Not because of that you should stop your critical thinking. You can obviously, based on what they tell you, you can ask questions and have a sincere discussion. When false opinions have been left behind, wisdom fully shines, because wisdom doesn't hold any opinion. Nowadays, wisdom is rare and precious. I mean, I guess I understand kind of where it's coming from on this one. I don't think wisdom or wise people don't have opinions. Obviously, they do have. But again, it's more as in, you have the wisdom to actually be part of a sincere discussion. I think it boils down to this, or that's why I like this precept. It's just as in, you keep evolving. I mean, with the raft, certain information will take you to a place, but that doesn't mean it's the end of it. You keep going. And anyway, the pillar of this precept is sapphire, because it's just like the clear sky. To conclude, this whole metaphor of these pillars, it comes down to, because this, as in, it's a double row of pillars. The ones where, the ones that you shouldn't follow and the ones that you should follow. Abstain and the positive ones. So it's a double row of pillars that holds a spacious dome of Dharma's building. And meditation is the dome itself, and wisdom as the needle which crowns it. So, and what I like is that he said that we have the potential to be the pillars, the dome, and the needle, and that we can also see this from a botanic perspective, which is like the 10 pillars are the 10 petals of a flower, the meditation is the yarn, and the wisdom is the seed or the fruit. And we are the flower which grows and blooms for its own good and for other living creatures. This I really liked. I think it was nicely put. But just to add is that I don't like him. I don't understand why he was pushing political views in his order. Also with his personal life, he has, I understand that people can, as in that people aren't perfect, but that's why you, don't be a shepherd if you're not perfect, or if you're not even trying to be perfect. I know that shepherds should, I am against shepherds to begin with. So it's just like he's just annoying because he didn't follow what he preached, and I just very much dislike that he was pushing his political ideologies into the Buddhist, or as in the Buddhist order. And also because for what I read, obviously the book didn't say it, is that after these scandals, these sexual scandals, he did mention that it wasn't obviously appropriate, and that because the order, like, because he carried the order, or because he was like the founder and the leader of this order, obviously he was tarnishing it. So he did apologize for his actions, and again, it wasn't with minors, so at least I don't know the details obviously of each of the ones, and I know that after that the order create like a small group of people that could investigate these specific cases and to try to mitigate or to help the people who felt at a discomfort during those encounters. Obviously, for me, it's not as in that you should be a celibate. It's more as in there should be the line of teacher disciple, and you shouldn't cross it. And if you're gonna cross it, then at least only once. Because let's say they fell in love or whatever, but I mean, there were several, so clearly there was something shady there. It's another book of this Pema Chodron, and I'm mentioning it. I mean, this one is like When Everything Falls Apart. I have read it. I will not discuss it now. Maybe I will reread it to take proper notes and share it, because it's a much better read, and she is much better. So the conclusion of this book, at least as in my take on it, is that probably I won't read more about him or what he wrote, because I very much don't like him. I will just try to read more about Buddhism, just to see if maybe I haven't read enough, or if he was crazy, and I do think he was crazy, especially also because of his lifestyle. So anyway, it's like this didn't distance myself from Buddhism again, because I did like some certain aspects of it, of the book, you know, like the precepts I think are good precepts, are, I mean, ethical principles that it would be nice if everyone would follow them. But, and there are like, I did like the metaphor of the pillars and the dome, and that we can become the pillars. Because he didn't walk the path is, I guess, what annoyed me, because he was a preacher, and I mean, don't be a preacher if you're not gonna follow what you're saying. Simple as that. And also because he was pushing political ideologies. So those are the main things that I very much dislike, and that's why I will try to avoid him as much as possible. Maybe, just maybe, I will give him another chance, but it will be later. And I also hope to read another Buddhist book, and I want to give some justice to Buddhism.